Hi, welcome to our next set of notes. This is factoring quadratic trinomials. With this, we did factoring quadratic trinomials once before, but the first time we did it when, here is that standard form of a quadratic trinomial. The first time we did it, all of our quadratic trinomials A equaled 1 when we factored. This time, all of these A will not equal 1, so it will make things a little bit more challenging. Now there's two methods that you are going to learn today on how to do this, okay? The first method is called factor by grouping. It is similar to the factor by grouping that we did, but there's actually a couple of previous steps that we have to do before we can get into the factor by grouping that we have been doing. I will say factor by grouping is probably the easiest method. It's the most time consuming, and unfortunately this method is not used later on in algebra. But again, it's fine to use for right now because it is a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and get started. Step 1 says to multiply A and C together. When we do that, we're going to take 6 times 1 and get 6. Step 2 says find two factors of that product that add up to B. So the two factors of 6 that add to 5 is going to be 2 plus 3. That adds to 5. Then number 3, rewrite the problem as 4 terms. That's key right here, to rewrite it as 4 terms. When I rewrite it, it's going to be 6a squared plus 2a plus 3a plus 1. Now, I took my ax squared, dropped it down. Instead of writing 5a, I wrote 2a plus 3a, and then I dropped down my c. Now, the key thing here is you have to remember how factoring is the process of undoing. And so we have undone something that was combined like terms. So again, if I would redo it and I combine like terms, I get where I started from. Okay? So this is why we do step 2. So we can rewrite it for step 3. Now step 4 is factor by grouping like we did on our previous assignment. So we're going to go ahead and put in our grouping symbols and then look for the GCF each time. So for the first one, the GCF is 2a, okay, and then when I divide each term by the GCF, I get 3a plus 1. For my second set of parentheses, the GCF is just plus 1, and then I'm left with 3a plus 1. We're going to go ahead and take both the GCFs, rewrite it as a product, as a factor, and then the other one will just combine. All right, and so what we're going to do, the same thing that we did the last time we did with trinomials, we're going to go ahead and check our answer before we move on to number 2. So real quick, to check our answer, I use distributive property, so 2a times 3a is 6a squared, 2a times 1 is 2a, 1 times 3 is 3a, 1 times 1 is 1, and then 2a plus 3a gives me the 5a. Okay, let's go ahead and try number 2. For number 2, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing where I'm going to do a times c. That gives me 15. Then factors of 15 that add to 16. That's going to be 1 and 15. When I add those together, I get 16. Now from here, what I'm going to do is rewrite my quadratic function as 4 terms. That's step 3. So I drop down 3x squared. Then instead of writing 16x, I'm going to write 1x, which is just x, then 15x, and then I drop down that plus 5. And again, this is a process of undoing. I took the 16x and I undid it. Okay? Now I put in my grouping symbols, and I complete this by factor by grouping. So my first set of parentheses, the GCF is x. I factor out an x, then I'm left with 3x plus 1. My second set of parentheses, the GCF is 5. And now when I divide each term by the GCF, I'm left with 3x plus 1. My last step, I'm going to rewrite my GCF as a product or as a factor, and then combine the other one. Now before I go on to my next problem, I'm going to double check this answer. So x times 3x is 3x squared. X times 1 is 1x. 5 times 3x is 15x. 5 times 1 is 5. When I combine my terms, I get 16x, so I did this one correctly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do number 3 as well. So for number 3, same thing. We're going to start with step 1, which is multiply a and c together. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Factors of negative 6, that would equal negative 1. That's going to be negative 3 plus 2 equals negative 1. And so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this problem as with 4 terms. So I drop down 2x squared, negative 3x, plus 2x minus 3. So remember, I took that negative x, I broke it apart because I'm undoing, and then I rewrite it that way, but I take my c and I drop that down. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in my grouping symbols. I'm going to start by factoring out the x. And when I divide each term by x, I'm left with 2x minus 3. The GCF for my next binomial is positive 1. And then I'm left with 2x minus 3. My last step, I'm going to take each GCF and combine it into one binomial, and then combine 2x minus 3 into one binomial. My very last step, we're going to check our work. So we get 2x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 3. If I combine negative 3 and a positive 2, I get that negative 1x. We'll go ahead and do 4 the next time I see you. Okay? Now this next method is called trial and error. Here we go. I got things in the way. There we go. So for trial and error, it really is where you have to think of factors for each a and c, place them in your answer, and then check possible answers by remultiplying until you find the factors that make the problem correct. This does require some erasing because, you know, it's trial and error, but the more you practice it, the easier it does get, and it does end up getting quicker than the top 3 that we did. So for step 1, factors of a and c. So the factors for a, for 7 is going to be 7 and 1. Factors for 4 is going to be 2 and 2, 4 and 1. Now the last thing that I'm going to do, or the next thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of put in my grouping symbols. So I only have one set of factors for a. So I know one of them has to be 7x, the other one has to be x. And when I remultiply to check my work, 7x times x, I'll get that 7x squared. Now for my other terms in my binomials, okay, so for these terms, this is where you know, we do some trial and error to find 29. So if I start with 2 and 2, well, I know they're all going to be positive, so I can put that in. Again, I know 7x times x will give me the 7x squared. 7x times 2 is 14x, and then 2 times x is 2x, and then 2 times 2 will be 4. 14x plus 2x is 16x. It's not 29, so this is where I'm going to have to erase. Now, 29 is a big number. Well, I know 7 times 4 is 28. The other factor for 4 is 1. So if I try this again, 7x times 4 is 28. 1 times x is the 1x. When I combine this, 28x plus 1x, I get that 29x. Okay, so now I know my answer is 7x plus 1, x plus 4. Okay? Now let's try number 6. So for number 6, my factor here for 6 is 2 and 3. And 1 and 6 for negative 2 or negative 4, it's going to be negative or positive 2, negative positive 2, negative positive 1, negative positive 4. I'm going to check something here real quick. Okay. And so now, same thing, we're going to go ahead and put in our grouping symbols. And my goal is to try and get this negative 5 right there. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start with 2y and 3y. And I know when I do 2y times 3y, I'll get that 6y squared. Now for the next term, I have to get negative 4. So one has to be positive, the other one's negative. And I don't know which one yet. So it's really a guess and check. I can go ahead and start with maybe putting my 2's in and see what happens. So, and then now I remultiply. 2y times negative 2 is negative 4y. 2 times 3 is 6y, and 2 times negative 2 is that negative 4. When I combine these two, I do not get negative 5. Okay, so that didn't work. If I changed my signs, I would get, like if I move those, a negative 6 and a positive 4, that still won't work. So I know that I have to work with 4 and 1. So how could I place this? I could put my 4 here and 1 here. And if I do that, 2y times negative 1 is negative 2y. 4 times 3 is positive 12y. Well, that right there gives me 10y, not 5y. So let's try this again. Try 4 here, 1 there. And 2y times negative 4 is negative 8y. 1 times 3y is positive 3y. And look at that, negative 8y plus 3y, I get that negative 5y. And luckily I had my signs in the right spot, so there's nothing else I have to do. Okay, let's go ahead and flip it over. Why don't we do, I'm going to do 7, and then we'll probably just do the rest next time I see you in class. Oops, here's 7. We'll do 7, and then we'll kind of work on the rest in class. So one more time with this trial and error. So this one, oh, this one's easy because there aren't too many factors for A and C. So we have 2, 1, 3, 1. And so I'm going to go ahead and stick in my binomials. I'm going to have 2x and x and 1. And then the other one, my option is going to be either 3, 1 or kind of the same thing but opposite. And because of the plus signs, I know these are going to be plus. So now we just kind of see what works. We'll go ahead and start with 2x times x. I know it's going to be 2x squared. 2x times, let's start with 3. That right there is 6x. 1 times x is x. And then 1 times 3 is plus 3. 6x plus x is 7x. So this doesn't work. So now let's try this again, where I do 2x times x is 2x, 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 1, I get that 3. 2x plus 3x, I get that 5x. Okay, so I know my final answer is 2x plus 3, x plus 1. Okay, so again, sometimes trial and error, it can be real quick, and some of you probably just see this without as much erasing as I have been doing. All right, that's it for these notes. I will see you next time, and then we'll finish these together in class. See you later.